All right. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Brand Builder TV, where your brand loyalty is king simply because it maps to trust. That's the long game. They want to be able, people want to be able to trust you. Listen, I'm going to read the bio of the gentleman we have on now because I don't want to miss a beat. First of all, Jason, thank you so much for your service, my man. Thank you so much. As I'm sure you hear all the time, listen, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for people like you. And just to give you a little, I never served, but my dad was 82nd Airborne World War II in 4 years over in Europe. And then my ex-father-in-law, who I just flew out and did his eulogy, was First Force Recon in Vietnam.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You got some good history there, man.
Oh man, I just came along. I'm just lucky, man. I'm blessed. So I was raised with the World War II generation, which my dad's philosophy was lace up your boots, get to work. Nobody wants to hear it.
Yep.
So I was very, very blessed.
We need a little bit more of that at times here.
We're getting there, my man. We're getting there. Yeah. People don't think we are, but we are. Let me read this before we get into the meat and potatoes of this. Jason Redman, motivational speaker, Navy SEAL leader, New York Times bestseller, The Trident, Purple Heart recipient, TEDx keynote speaker, Overcome and Conquer show. Overcome and Conquer. Is that a podcast?
Yeah, that's our podcast on iTunes. Slaying
awesome.
It, man.
Awesome. Peak performance coach. I love it. And you want to know something, Jason? You want to know one of the things I love about this bio, and most people aren't going to even believe this, is the first title, motivational speaker, and I'll tell you why. I'm Dave Daly, the Monster Motivator, right? There's so many big names in our niche, in our world, that shy away from the title motivational speaker because they don't feel like it's deep enough. And I break it down this way. I believe life is a trifecta. Motivation, inspiration, and perspiration. You need all three in that order. You need something that's going to get you up in the morning and get you the starting blocks. You're going to need something that's going to carry you through that comes from here. And nothing happens without perspiration. I'm sure you will back me on that. But I just want to throw that out there that I want to acknowledge, and it's refreshing that you embrace that title.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, I love it. It is one of my duties. I feel like I got a second chance in life, and I love doing it. I love motivating and inspire people to be the best version of themselves. And motivation, dedication, and perspiration. That's your trifecta, right?
Motivation, inspiration, and perspiration.
Yeah. So you can't get to the perspiration if you cannot get that motivation going. And it's one of the big things that I talk about, and I love it. It is a gift. I mean, it's a gift to be a monster motivator, and I love it, man. It fires me up to be able to get in front of people, and I don't care when I speak or on Instagram. If one person reaches out and says, "Hey, man, you're making a difference. Thank you for what you're doing," I'm like, boom. Hey, this is what it's about. Keep going.
Absolutely. It's just really, honestly, it's about alignment, man. And when you can get to that point, when you feel that and you get that return, the alignment is second to none. Give us a little 30,000 foot view, man, of why you're even here. Give us that 30,000 foot view, man, of Jason Redman.
What's amazing is a lot of people read my bio and they're like, "Oh my God, all these things you've done." But I'm an average, ordinary kid, man, and I am not the average of what people think of when they think of a Navy SEAL. I'm not kidding you. I was the 90-pound weakling when I was a kid. I'm a small guy. I'm 5'8", and now I'm about 170 pounds. But literally, when I was in high school, and the point when I decided I was going to be a Navy SEAL, I was 14, and I probably weighed 90 pounds. And I'm not kidding you. People laughed me out of classrooms. They laughed me out of school. They laughed me out of the recruiting office when I showed up the first time and said I wanted to be a SEAL. So I am an average, everyday kid. We were poor when I grew up, and I just followed a dream. And I said, I'm going to follow this dream, and I achieved it at a very young age, at 19, right there in San Diego, in your backyard. From January of 95 to December of 95, man, I grinded through SEAL training, 19 years old, and I made it. And the bottom line is, what I tell people anybody can do it because my path was anything but normal. I accelerated at a young age. I became a leader. I got selected to become an officer. I became an officer in the SEAL teams. And then once again, I tripped and made some mistakes, man. Ego and arrogance, which often happens when we accelerate quickly at a young age into levels of leadership, fame, notoriety, whatever it is. I see it a lot in professional athletes that they have this stumble, and I had the same stumble as a young leader. I had to course correct. I had to fix myself. I got myself back on track. I'm accelerating in my career. And very eventful Iraq deployment in 2007. And then very end of that deployment, I found myself on the receiving end of a machine gun, shot 8 times in a gunfight, including a round in the face. Started a whole new journey of being put back together and learning about myself and learning what it is to lead and motivate and to drive forward despite whatever adversity we find. It also taught me a key lesson about leadership, that you can lead from any situation, including a hospital bed. So that just became I call the day I got shot my rebirth day. And that became the day I got reborn and realized, hey, man, I can continue to do great things. I continue to help people. I got to figure out what my new 100% is. And I've just driven forward from there. Finished my military career, did 21 years.
Oh, wow.
Started a nonprofit to help wounded warriors, ran that for almost 10 years. During that time, started speaking, wrote my first book, The Trident, which was about that whole journey, about this young kid that became a SEAL, that crash and burn failed.
Yeah.
And then picked himself up, redeemed himself, then was severely wounded, and then figured out how to lead forward from there. That book went on to be a New York Times bestseller. And after I phased down my nonprofit, I'm now fully focused on getting out there and teaching leadership and resiliency, teaching people how to get off the X, and just released my new book, Overcome, that came out in December, which is all about these principles, how to lead yourself out of these life ambushes, crisis, failure, change, and just crush adversity and drive forward and be the best version of yourself.
Love it, man. I love it. I'm a big believer and fan that contrast is power, right? Contrast gives us that other perspective, right? And I have a full keynote on the power of perception. And to me, that's our superpower, right? It's either our strongest propeller or heaviest anchor. We have to decide on what that is. And when it's interesting, man, I went through some things. Obviously, I didn't serve, so it's not that similar, but similar in the fact that I had a real bad motorcycle accident in intensive care for 4 or 5 days, broke everything on this side, punctured a lung, didn't know if I was going to be able to walk again, right? Anyway, long story short, that got me out of that fear barrier of how do I sell my first business, because I was a kid that was left back in the 2nd grade, diagnosed with ADD, said I had a learning disorder, never graduated high school, and they told me I wasn't supposed to win. So when I had a successful business that I wanted to sell, that old fear barrier came back, right? The biggest bully that we know. And it kept saying, maybe you got lucky, right? Maybe you can't do this again. Maybe if you sell this, you're going to lose everything. Took a weekend away in Vermont, crashed my bike, and that was a wake-up call, man. Life said, tomorrow isn't guaranteed.
That's right.
So from that point on, within a year, I sold that business and never had that exact fear barrier again, you know? So I love that, man. I love at the end of the day, it's that real world wisdom that you're bringing to the table, and that separates you from everybody because it's your flavor, right? It's what you went through. And that's what we talk about here on Brand Builder TV, branding and marketing in 2020 versus 2004. And I'm a big believer that your personal brand is the epicenter versus your business brand. 2004, it was reverse. But because of social media, because of these platforms, we want Jason to take us behind that black curtain, man. We want to know as much as we can about you so we can connect. And I believe everything just blossoms from there. I'd love to hear your take on when you work with your coaching clients, when you speak from stage about the branding and the marketing in 2020, because your whole brand is so much your flavor, man, that I love it. I resonate with it.
Yeah, you know, the biggest things I ran when I ran my nonprofit, I ran a course specifically for wounded warriors called the Overcome Academy. And we taught them purpose. We taught them how to find their new mission in life. And we did a lot of deep drills. And the last thing we taught them how to do was to speak, how to tell their story. And I teach 3 parts of being an effective speaker. You got to have a story with a purpose. It's not just one thing. There's some good speakers out there that just have a story, but you don't walk away with much afterwards. Mm-hmm. So story with a purpose. You got to be passionate and you got to be authentic. Those are the 3 parts that people listen to anybody. I don't care if you get up there and you talk about being a trash collector. If you have those 3 parts, people are going to listen. And that's what I realized. So I've just stayed true to myself. I don't ever try and get up there. I don't tell you I was the baddest Navy SEAL on the planet. I sure wasn't, by a long stretch, man. I am an average everyday kid that grew up, and I managed to achieve some great things. And it all came down to a couple of key things. And actually it comes back to what you were talking about, Dave, that so many people are limited by fear. They get stuck in their own heads. I call it the demon. And the greatest thing about this life, and especially living in America, and it's everything that I speak on. As a matter of fact, my TED Talk is specifically about this, is the greatest gift you have is a choice. You have a choice in how you're going to deal with whatever adversity you encounter, whatever fear, whatever, I don't care what it is. You know, if you're standing in the face of a madman with a gun who's getting ready to blow your head off, you have a choice in how you're going to deal with it. Are you going to beg and grovel? Or are you just going to stand there and recognize? Or are you going to try and sort your way? It doesn't matter. All of those things come down to a choice. And that's one of the most powerful things we have. And everything I do is built around that. And I'm not perfect, man. I make mistakes all the time. You know, and sometimes, you know, I'm grinding through also, and I'm firing myself up. You know, my wife, God love her, man, my long-haired admiral, she'll be like, hey, do you need to listen to one of your own speeches? And I'm like, roger that. Let me get myself back on course. Let me pull out my compass and get on track and let's go. So yeah, man, that's me. And I think I don't really try to be anybody else. I am who I am. You know, there's some people out there that are like, oh man, you should teach more fighting or you should teach more shooting. And I did those things, but that's not really who I want to be. I am a guy who got a second chance multiple times in my life through a leadership failure, obviously through a near-death battlefield experience. And it made me realize that everybody out there has a choice in how they're going to deal with the adversity, how they're going to drive forward with their life. And I want to unlock that within them and show them that they have the choice to be an amazing person. So many people are limited by the lies they believe, and they only become about, you know, a tenth of who they actually have the ability to be.
I love that. And let's go a little deeper on the power of that superpower of choice, because it creates what I believe everyone's looking for, whether they realize it or whether they realize it or not, or whether they want to admit it or not. It's that freedom. When you can say and wrap your brain about what you just shared with us, that you have the power of choice, now you have the ultimate freedom, which is what everybody is striving for. Again, whether they realize it or whether they want to admit it or not. So I love that you articulate it that way, because it to me, it maps the freedom. And what else is there after that? I mean, where else does it go, right? After that.
Yeah.
I love that. And obviously the authenticity, and one of my statements that I use all the time, or whatever title you want to put on it, it's all on my marketing stuff, is I always say your authenticity becomes your superpower, right? When you go through those struggles, right, and you make it to the other end, that becomes your credibility, right? That becomes I built and sold 3 companies through the industries, but I also crashed one to the ground, had to get through a bankruptcy, right? And when I speak, I always say, make sure that when you introduce me, highlight that I crashed it to the ground, because that's a window in time. There's not a university in this world that could have taught me what I learned in that window of time of crashing a business to the ground, right? So, you know, your authenticity is your credibility. And that's what people want to know. And you're doing it, and you're 10Xing the hell out of it, man. I love it, man. And that's why I was pumped to have you on. Let's talk about your book, Overcome. So give us a 30,000 foot view of that book. And when did it come out?
December 10th. So I mean, it is fresh. Yeah, man. Thank you. It's fresh out of the gates. It's getting great reviews. People are loving. I tell you, what's getting the best reviews is the audio book, which I actually got to read the audio book, and people are like, "Oh my God!" And it makes sense because I talk about hard things in this book. I talk about, like in business, you talk about the lessons we learned. I talk about a lawsuit I got involved in, a bitter, devastating lawsuit between guys who were friends of mine. We went into a business agreement, nothing written. We were friends. We don't need to have an agreement. And, it just kind of fell apart. And unfortunately, sometimes those things get really ugly. And it was one of the harder events of my life I had to grind through. It was I talk about 3 major life ambushes, but I get ahead of myself. The Trident, Overcome, what is it about? Basically, I survived an enemy ambush on the battlefields of Iraq. And one of the things about being in special operations, I spent my entire adult life trying to understand basically how to put the enemy in a specific point that we could either attack, capture, or kill them. And the mechanics of that are fairly structured, if you will. There's also a reverse side to that coin. If you are on the X, or if you are in the middle of the attack, there is a structure and mechanics on how we get out of it. And I started to look at that, and I started to look at how different people react to hard moments they have in their life. And one day I had this epiphany, and I was like, man, people in life that come under attack or come under, life ambush, as I started calling them, they act almost the same way as what I see people, how they react in gunfights when they really haven't been trained. They freeze, they lock up, they get overwhelmed. Oftentimes they're in denial about what's happening because they don't want to acknowledge the level of danger and the level of problems that are existing. So it really became the basis of this book, because I realized that the mechanics, they apply to everyday life. So I took a lot of the lessons that I learned in special operations, and then I turned them so that they were applicable to everyday life. I created this methodology called the REACT methodology. So basically, if you are in an ambush, and when I define an ambush, I define it as anything that will leave a physical, mental, or emotional scar on you. And everybody in life goes through these major ambushes. The average person will go through at least 5 over their lifetime. I've been through 3 major life ambushes. My leadership failure, my battlefield injuries, and that lawsuit were the 3 major life ambushes I went through. I will never forget them. When we think back on those ambushes, Dave, same as you, when you went through that motorcycle wreck, you can think back now to those feelings when you were in the hospital and doctors were telling, I don't know if you're going to walk, I don't know if you're going to recover. Just that gut-wrenching feeling in your chest of, oh my God, how do I drive forward from that? Mm-hmm. And we still carry the pain, the scars, the emotions, all of that. Those are life ambushes. And it may not be bombs or bullets, actual, enemy bombs and bullets that are hitting you, but in life, they feel like it. They feel like the same thing that I felt in that firefight in Iraq. And that is the baseline of this book. It starts, part 1 is all about what do you do if you are in a life ambush? How do you get out of it? We use the REACT methodology, which is an acronym, and we talk about the processes and steps, how to evaluate what's going on around you. And most importantly, we talk about that choice. So many people waste so much time when they're in ambushes focusing on the things they can't control. We waste so much time looking at the past, looking at what we lost, looking at all the things, looking for things to blame that we have absolutely zero control over. In a real world ambush and in a life ambush, if you're ever going to move off it, and the faster you move off of it, the better. We got to be looking at the things we can control. We got to evaluate, and that's how we drive forward. So part 1 is about that. Part 2 is how we lead ourselves. It's one of the most critical things. And it's how you set yourself up for success in special operations. We were very proactive in how we dealt with threats and how we train. We should be the same way in life. Life ambushes are coming. If we know that you're going to sustain at least 5 over your lifetime, why do most people live their life in a way that they're so unprepared when they come? I hear so many people that get into a life ambush that I know, and they go, oh my God, I never saw that coming. And I'm like, really? You never saw this divorce coming? Dude, I've been around you for 1.5 years, and I've watched the signs, and you steadily plummet down. You ignored the signs is really what happened. So it talks about how we lead ourselves, how we are proactive, and how we deal with these things. Section 3 is all about how we lead others. Because the reality is when we get in a life ambush, you're not on the X. You're not in it alone. You know, if you are a family, if you're part of a family, if you're a parent, your kids are on the X with you. Your spouse is on the X with you. Your boyfriend or girlfriend's on the X with you. If you own a business, your employees are on the X with you. Your teammates, your board, whatever it is, they're in that ambush with you. And it is critical as leaders. We have to be able to lead them out of it too. How do we motivate and inspire in the spite of chaos and adversity and all that overwhelming feeling? And then the last part of the book is how do we lead always? How do we build that overcome mindset so that we always have this leadership mindset, regardless of what's going to happen to us? So that's what the book's about. It's getting great reviews, and I love it because the people that are reading it, a lot of people I think may look at it and say, well, I'm not a military member, so I don't know how this book will apply to me. And then they read it and they go, oh my God, man, this is so applicable. And we had great contributors. I selected high-level military contributors who had been exposed to both real ambushes, enemy ambushes, but also had been exposed to life ambush, so we could continue to make that parallel and connection. So I had guys like Jocko Willink, Mark Devine contributed, Admiral Bill McCraven contributed.
Wow.
One of the amazing stories, General Stan McChrystal, which he talks about, and if any of you out there don't recognize his name, he was the general in charge of the war in Afghanistan around 2012, I believe. And there was a Rolling Stones article that came out where some of his staff had said some pretty negative things about the administration. And President Obama, basically forced him to resign. So here's a guy, 26 years of his military career, probably would have been the next chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. And like that, life ambush, military career over. And he talked about how he dealt with that and how he drove forward and the struggles he had. But more importantly, he focused on what he could control and not what he couldn't control. And then he launched this whole new business, the McChrystal Group. He's crushing it. He's doing great things out there. So that's what this book is about. The only limitations you have are the ones you place on yourself. There's always options. There's always the ability to get off the X. And, I give you a step-by-step process to do it and implement it.
Love it, man. Give us your definition of the X.
So the X is any point of incident or attack or any sticking point in your life.
Okay.
And here's one of the more interesting things. As I get out there and I speak so much on the X, and my phrase, you'll hear me say it all the time, you got to get off the X, is sometimes the X is not this, catastrophic firefight that's going on in your life where you're just being struck with bullets or bombs. I'm having more and more people reach out to me that have read the book or they've heard me speak and they say, oh my God, I realize I've been on the X for years. The X can become this sticking point where you just settle. You just settled and you stopped going after your hopes and dreams. You stopped taking care of yourself. You stopped doing the things that you needed to do to move the needle in your life. And you just became stagnant one day and literally you just died. You were a dead man walking and you're just going through life dead. And it's nice because a lot of people are waking up and realizing, holy smokes, I'm on the X. I got to get off the X and get my life back in gear. I got to reignite the fire in my marriage. I got to reignite the fire in my business, or I got to go after those hopes and dreams I left on the table years ago, convinced that I would never go after them. And now I realize it's never too late. And that is an absolute fact. It is never too late.
I love that. And as you're talking, what I map it right back to is level of awareness, right? Building the level of awareness in yourself, knowing, okay, I'm dropping the ball here in my marriage. I'm dropping the ball here in my partnership and my business, right? To build that level of awareness to where you can stop that negative momentum and start to make that shift, right? And start to move that into the direction you want it to go, into that positive direction. Here's what I'd love for you to do before we jump off, because I want to be respectful of your time. But I want you to give us some golden nuggets. See, we both do some things that most people are terrified of, speaking from stage, right? And bringing people behind that black curtain and sharing I call it the real, raw, and live. Right? And you're doing both at a huge level. How do people get past that fear barrier of being authentic and sharing the real? How do they do that?
I think for some people, it's, I mean, if you read either one of my books, The Trident or Overcome, I pull no punches on myself. I'm very transparent. And I think as a leader, one of the most important things Jocko talks about in his book, Extreme Ownership, leadership always comes back to us. And it's almost never that when things start to fall apart, as human beings, we have this natural tendency to look around. We want to blame everything else, all the external factors. When 95% of the time, it was on us. It was on the leader themselves. And I think when people can start to look around at others and say, wow, that guy was willing to be super honest with who he was, and maybe I need to be honest with myself. And once you start to be able to become honest with yourself and realize none of us are as great as we think we are, nobody is perfect, we are all flawed. I don't care what you see on Instagram, this beautiful, I'm so perfect view. None of us are that perfect, man. I have problems. I have setbacks. But you know what? I get up and I keep driving forward. And that's the difference between peak performers and the average person. Peak performers always get back up and drive forward. They may have a hard moment. They may have a wrong moment. They may have a total crash and burn moment. But the difference is average people settle and say, well, I'm never going to be able to get up again. And they believe it and they lay on the X and they wither and die. And peak performers pick themselves back up and they start grinding and clawing forward again. That's the difference. And that's how I've tried to live my life. So for people out there, you just got to get honest with yourself. And I'm willing to peel that onion back. I'm willing to tell people this is me. This is where I've been. These are the problems I've had. These are the mistakes that I've made. And it's so funny. People don't want to do that. They're so afraid of it. But guess what, man?
And you know what? Let's do this, right? Because we both know that they're so terrible. I just did a talk 2 days ago at a business function for entrepreneurs. Anyway, and I spoke about that. And let's give them the antidote. Let's give them the kryptonite for that. What I call the biggest bully you're ever going to meet in life, which is the fear barrier. And let's teach them how to get their lunch money back from that bully, right? And that is. And I want you to give your take on this. But here's what I tell people. You were bad enough to make it through. So now it's your obligation to share how you did it in order to wear those scars with pride. And Jason, on top of that, also share the feeling. See, here's the kryptonite. The liberation that you feel when you do share your real on the back end, on the stumbles, on the things that you thought was going to break you, but it didn't. The liberation and the inner power that creates within you. You're the guy to share that, man, because this is what you do for a living. Share that kryptonite, man, for people that are terrified of what other people think. But share with us the inner strength once you get the courage to share it, even for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, once you get there, I'd be lying if I told you I'd never cared what other people think.
Of course.
Although I'm pretty darn good at ignoring what other people think. But I mean, all of us are human. We all, we're like, what is that person going to think about? I'll tell you, when I wrote The Trident and I wrote all the leadership mistakes I made, when we were writing that, and I went back and read it, when we had that first part where I talk about those leadership failures and the bad decisions, the poor selfish decisions that I had made, I remember sitting there reading it thinking, oh my God, do I really want to put this out to the world? Do I really want to admit this?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? It's truth. It is what happened. And I said, there's so many people out there that have failed and are still stuck in their failure years later. I have met people that are stuck in their failure at the end of their life. They are now elderly and they stopped living because of some failure, because they were too afraid to get past it and admit it and put it behind them. And I realized in that moment, that is the power. Here was the other thing I realized. I have people in the SEAL teams, a small minority at this point, that don't like me because of those failures. They want to keep me in that failure spot. And I don't know what it is as humans. There's a lot of humans out there that live their life that way. They want to be like, Dave, I remember when you crashed and burned that business, man. You're a POS, man. And you should always be remembered for crashing and failing in that business. Yeah, so what? When you put it out there and you're like, you're right, man, I did. And guess what? I learned so much from it. I'm so much better from it now. I'm teaching other people how to overcome it. It now becomes power. And that is truly the kryptonite, because you now have taken everything away from the naysayers who want to say, oh, you failed at this, you stumbled, you did X, you did Y. When you own it and you're like, yep, it's what I did. And guess what? It made me better. I became better because of my failures. I became better because of my faults. And guess what? Now I can help others hopefully avoid them. And if they don't avoid them, I can help pick them up and get them moving forward off the X again. So own it, and you take away all the power from those out there who want to try and hold you in it.
Love it. You become bulletproof. I always tell people you become bulletproof when you put it out there and you own it and you step up. You become bulletproof. And it's funny because when you look at
Dave, I'm not bulletproof. I just want to let you know that. I have proven it. Like, I was shot 8 times. I was not bulletproof anyway whatsoever.
Well, you know where I'm talking about, right? When you put it out there, right? Yeah. And it's interesting to drive that further for people that still are saying, well, I'm not sure. What's the first thing that a PR company does for a high-end athlete or an entertainer when they have a hiccup? Own it. Just step up. We're going to write you a letter. The quicker you own it, right, the quicker it just disappears. And one of the biggest ones was back in the day, whether you agree with them, whether you don't, whether you like them, you don't, has nothing to do with it. But when that little black book came out for that madam back in the day for all the entertainers, and Charlie Sheen goes, yeah, that was me. That's my life. Everyone goes, oh, okay. Again, whether you agree with it or you don't, right? It's not the point. The point is, he said, that's what I do. This is me, right? I own it. So once you own it, you become bulletproof. Here's the other thing I tell people too, Jason, and I know you're going to connect with this, and I will respect your time. We are human beings. What that means is we are going to judge, and we will be judged on a daily basis. It's the reality of life. I get judged on a daily basis. You know what I hear all the time? Because of my appearance, bald guy that goes to the gym, he's got tattoos, he looks like this biker guy. I always hear this. Once I get to connect with people, they go, man, you're so much nicer than I thought, right? Here's what I tell people. You're going to judge, and you're going to be judged. Your only job is to make them accurate.
Yep.
That's it. That's it. That's the hack. If you want to really get to the nuts and bolts, you're going to be judged. We're judging our appearance every single moment. But just make them accurate, man. That's your only job. And then you leave.
Hey, I got one final component to that, Dave, to add to it for all those people out there. When we talk about being judged, because that fear, you bring up a great point. And it falls into something I talk about in the book called social leadership. 5 levels of leadership to be an effective leader and to be a balanced leader. Social leadership is, who do you surround yourself with, and how do you invest in those relationships? One of the biggest things that I see people afraid to admit, some of their failures, is who they surround themselves with. And if their circle of friends are like, oh my God, they'll never tolerate that. Either A, it's a lie and their friends would actually tolerate it. It's a lie in their own head. Or B, if they don't tolerate it, you're around the wrong circle of people, and it's time to start moving on, because you're never going to level up. So that's a key thing you need to be looking at, man. When you want to be honest with yourself and you're ready to own some of those mistakes, if the circle of people around you don't want to be around you when you own them, it's time to move on, man. It's time to level up. So that's another thing that I've seen. So
love that, man. Love that. Hey, where can everyone find you?
So yeah, you can go to jasonredman.com is my website. On that website, it'll take you to getoffx.com, which is my coaching, and I got my online store. You can buy books there. I am on all the major platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm most active on Jason Redman WW, and I'm out there motivating, inspiring. My TED Talk should go live any day now, so I'm excited to get that out there. And yeah, man, that's what it's all about. Every day is a gift, and you have a choice in how you're going to live it.
I love that, man. Definitely follow this man on Instagram for sure. That's how we connected. And definitely, and also you promote your podcast and anything we could do to help. Feel free, man, to reach out. Open door policy, man. So, and is that the name of the podcast as well?
The podcast is the Overcome and Conquer Show.
That's it.
So it's myself and Ray Cash Care. Ray's just a beast, man. He's a fellow SEAL. We went through training together. We have a lot of fun on the show. We interview some amazing people. Our next episode is actually Bill McRaven, Admiral Bill McRaven, Make Your Bed. And it's just a lot of fun. We play off the fact that I was a SEAL officer. Ray was SEAL enlisted, and there's a lot of banter. He makes fun of me, and it's a good show. But we dig deep into the individuals we have on the show, how they have built that overcome and conquer mindset in their life as a leader.
Love it, man. Love it. I wish you all the best, all the luck, all the success in the world. And again, thank you for your service. And I know you got a lot of balls in the air, right? Like all of us. So thank you for taking the time and sharing this real world wisdom, man, because it means a lot. And it's going to mean a lot to our audience. And let's definitely stay connected. And when you find yourself in SoCal, reach out, man. Let's grab a cup of coffee.
Yeah, brother, I'll hit you up, man, for sure. We'll link up while I'm out there. So,
absolutely.
Dave, thanks for having me, man. Keep slaying it. Monster Motivator.
let's